Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com, and I am here with a special treat. We have one of our more successful clients who's also extraordinarily thoughtful and reflective and has some particularly interesting insights to share. But she's agreed to share this session so you can benefit from her experience and strength and hope and wisdom, as well as her trials and tribulations and stumbles and falls. Isn't that right, Sybil?
I can't wait to share, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
I tried.
Very nice.
Okay, so we're going to assume people haven't heard the other interview because we had some tech problems.
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't mind just kind of starting from the beginning of your eating problems and then tell me how you found us and what happened.
Okay, like so many others I've heard on your podcast interviews, I also learned how to emotionally eat since a teenager. So basically my entire adult life was knowing that with any uncomfortable emotion, I could quickly extinguish it with a hit of some type of food that would just distract and numb, and just always being on or off a diet. It wasn't until November of 2024 when I was looking for yet again another diet, always thinking that whatever diet I found was the one that would set me free for life. I came across your book, Defeat Your Cravings. I bought it, and when I opened it and read it, you had me for page one. I read it from cover to cover in one sitting.
Honored, thank you.
It was incredible. And it was a different perspective from anything else I had learned, read, experienced. It wasn't a diet, and it was a way of being, a way of living, a way of relating in the world with food on a daily basis. And I just knew that this time, this was the one. I really knew it because I knew that the magic I was looking for always, I was searching for that magic potion of whatever it was. With your book and your method, I realized that the magic was me, because it was so much putting the person in an empowering situation and understanding really what these food urges were about. When I always thought it was me, I realized it was a part of me, a part of my survival instinct in my lower brain that was creating very specific food suggestions with powerful eat now urges. And that was a game changer.
Love it. Okay, you said a couple of things in there I'd like to unpack.
Okay.
Let's do them one at a time. Could you describe the diet mentality to me versus the defeat your cravings mentality? Could you maybe unpack that and give us a little more dimension or specifics about what's different and why in your estimation, and I'll try to chime in afterwards.
Okay, that's a great question. The difference of a diet versus defeat your cravings approach. So a diet for me was something I would start and it had an endpoint. Even though they suggested maintenance programs, a diet was for me a departure from being off a diet. So I would go on something and go off it. It was very much about deprivation, rules of what I can and cannot eat. And there was more of an external force rewarded by weight loss. That for me was my diet life. And what I found was with dieting, I would rebel from deprivation to binge. And it's funny how in probably the last 10 years, when I would reach my goal weight, the destination was the goal weight from the diet. So the reward was eating. I
Right.
would just eat myself out of the goal weight. But the difference with the Defeat Your Cravings approach is that it removes the external motivations, etc., and it makes it internal. It's building a relationship of an inner knowing with yourself. That was my favorite. It really allowed you to learn how to quiet yourself to be able to hear this voice and to know that if there's, let's say, a voice, or as you call it, the pig, urging you to eat something that is not in your best interest or your higher self, that's not coming from a place of you. That is the other force. And I did not really know that that existed. I always thought I was squealing.
Give me an example just for the audience if you have a good
Okay.
example. Yeah.
I have a great example. And for me, my biggest challenge was settling myself after dinner. And I would find myself on particular days, if I was not being what I determined good, I'd make a path back and forth to the kitchen after I was satisfied, after I'd eaten. And so there was something asking me to, oh yeah, get some dessert or get this or get that. Ooh, this will be good. Making all of these suggestions. And I didn't learn until your program, and I accepted the phrase or the word, the pig. I tried other things, but ultimately the pig became just the word to use, that it was this pig voice or suggestions that was pulling me forward. That was the difference. That was an example, hearing suggestions after I was physically comfortable. And the emotional eating part is moving from comfortable to discomfort. It's either on both ends of the spectrum, discomfort from deprivation or discomfort from stuffing feelings ultimately with food. And then full and quiet.
And so, how did the feature cravings remove the deprivation on both ends for you? That was a good description of the diet mentality versus defeat your cravings. And I appreciate you putting that in a unique way. Sounds like it took you out of that deprivation of binging because you're, deprived of all the things you really want to achieve in life, and, deprivation of not binging where you feel like you can't have the chocolate cake because someone else is telling you not to. How did defeat your cravings take you out of both ends of that?
Defeat Your Cravings helped me to understand the difference of deficit and deprivation. And it gave me a level of consciousness about eating because I would go unconscious. On the binge side, you just throw all your desires of your future away and you're in the moment, only in the moment. And that's what the pig wants, just to be in the moment. And deprivation is the diet mentality of depriving yourself, not trusting your instincts, not allowing yourself to eat in a way that sustains long-term health and feeling good enough. But the deficit I realized through Defeat Your Cravings is that ultimately this is a weight loss goal program. I mean, that is the point, at least it was for me, to lose weight, but to understand a balance, that I don't want to go into deprivation, which ultimately leads to a binge every single time because it's driven, I learned, with a survival instinct. But I also don't want to binge because there's a whole level of hopelessness there. And I never really knew how to not be on a diet and have balance. I knew how to lose weight and I knew how to gain weight, but I never knew how to maintain weight. And so Defeat Your Cravings through your method taught me the difference of what deficit looks like, deprivation, and binge, so that I could know how to create balance.
That's wonderful. What would I see if I were to follow you around when you were in deprivation versus binging versus deficit? What would I see in terms of how Sybil acts on a day-to-day basis that was different?
Oh, that's another great question. And that's funny because I know exactly what each one looks like.
Tell me.
So, oh, this is good. So, deprivation is usually guided by an external force telling me what to eat, in what amount, and maybe things I don't even like. And it's telling me when I have to eat it, and just really very rigidly putting my body into a place where I'm at an extreme caloric deprived place. I am frequently hungry. I am white knuckling it, trying to ignore my natural body signals. I can often have low blood sugar, feeling tired, waiting to go to sleep in the day so that I can get through it, and then wait until the next weigh-in so that I can know that it was worth it. Let's say if I got on the scale, the external motivation and the number didn't match up to the level of sacrifice and deprivation, I'd blow it and go and have a sweet something, or it would take me right into back where I started. That'd be a hot mess, that one right there. That's a total path of yo-yo dieting right
Mm,
there.
mm.
The extreme of that on the binge side is that I'm in the diet, in the deprivation. I've been on the diet for a certain amount of time. And at a certain point, maybe I'm at a restaurant trying to suffer through a salad with no dressing and, or whatever to stay on the diet.
Your big plate of dirt and rocks.
Right? The old dirt and rock approach. So then coming home, not fully feeling like I could eat like a normal person, right? Frustrated, feeling deprivation from a different way emotionally, in addition to the actual physical deprivation with food, feeling resentful, feeling angry, welling up with all of these feelings, feeling like a victim, and just boom, maybe it doesn't happen that day, but within 24 hours, 48 hours, right back into a binge. So that's on the extreme. And then the balance of a deficit is, first, I have to have a baseline knowing what is my maintenance level, the amount of food that is in the certain categories of variety, and then the macros, and then knowing what's over that, making a conscious choice if I go over, and I can if I plan it, then I know that that's eating over the amount of maintaining. I can eat to maintain, or I can decide to have a little smaller portion spread out of those macros and know that I'm putting my body in a comfortable deficit that would lead to a comfortable weight loss of something that I'm comfortable with. My brain will still function. My blood sugar will still be stable. I can still move my body and work up a sweat without feeling like I could pass out. That's the difference. And I'm eating that 3 balanced meals 3 times a day.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, one of the reasons I said at the very beginning that you were among our most successful clients is because you've really made this mental transformation and you understand that you've made it and you value it and you do everything you can to sustain it. You really have exited the diet mentality.
Yes.
How did you get there? How did you go from A to B? What was the
Oh,
journey like? Tell me.
that's my favorite. I, because that was 100% from your book to your coaching program that I made that shift. So after I read the book, I decided that I wanted my life fully, like in color, all the way. I wanted freedom all the way. And I wanted peace of mind. Before my body, it needed to start in my mind, because what I wanted most was to have freedom between meals, every meal, not just after breakfast, after lunch, that, sometimes at 3 o'clock desire for sugar or anything like that, or especially after dinner. I wanted to have freedom where I didn't even think about food between meals. That seemed like a dream. Like, imagine that. And I wanted to be able to think about other things in my life and have a fuller life. So when I started your coaching program, I initially went in like, oh, yes, I'm going to lose weight. It's going to be great. But as I got into the program and started getting comfortable with the tools, I decided to be able to have this dream of a quiet, peaceful mind and a fuller life. I wanted to focus on skill mastery, because I knew for sure if my mind could be quiet, the kitchen could be closed between each meal, the weight loss would follow. And if I could master these skills, I would have them for life. I chose to go inner versus outer. And I just did the work. My coach, Yvonne, was supporting me in that.
What was the
Mhm.
work?
It was what you call the 3 R's. So it's rules,
Re-
reasons, and refutations.
yes.
It was establishing what rule was most important. And for me at that time, the 3 meals a day with no snacks in between, that had to happen. And it was also having meals no longer than 5 hours apart, because I would sometimes do that. And then I stretch it out too far, get low blood sugar, and give into something that's not right for me. But I also didn't want to eat more than 4 hours apart. So I had to have rules. I had to have reasons of why I wanted those rules. Like, why was this important to me? And I knew I wanted that peaceful mind. That was freedom for me, freedom for the rest of my life. If I could just stick to those rules, have a good, strong reason. And then the refutations is that pig coming in and trying to say, you've been great. You lost a little weight, or, your pants are fitting better, or all the reasons why the pig wants me to break the rule. So by having those rules, reasons, and refutations, that was the foundation.
I
That
just,
had to be established.
I just want to give credit where credit is due. We did develop the idea of doing all three of those things in the program. But Kimberly Reef, one of my former master coaches who's been interviewed on the podcast quite a few times, she came up with the idea of reading them all together out loud once a day at least. She calls it her 3 R's, and she actually likes to rewrite her reasons in some way every day. I don't find that necessary. She does. But I just want to give credit to her for coming up with the 3R nomenclature and getting people to do that every day.
Okay, great. I thought it was integrated in the program. I know that the rules, number one, is foundation. You got to have rules. I started with just that one rule. And I knew that to have the rules and to know when I was breaking them, and I had to know when I was in line with my rules and out. So that was number one.
Because most people aim at a fuzzy target. With eating, for some reason, most people think it's a bad idea to have a very clear bullseye. They aim at a fuzzy target, and as a result, they hit something else, right? And so we say you really need to set up these very specific and precise rules so that you know when you're about to break them, like a tripwire or an alarm that you set up around the perimeter of your house so you know when the vampire is about to get in.
Absolutely. You're so right, because I'd be so unconscious about these urges and I would just follow them before, because I thought it was me asking me for something and I wouldn't lead myself astray. Would I? Well, I did. And until I knew that there was a force that was asking me to break a rule, then that was it. I had to get off the scale. That was personal for me, because I felt like the scale was triggering me to give the pig a reason. And I also wanted to have a journey that was motivated deeply inside for me, and not to be so focused on the number until I could handle it. Eventually, I became fine with it. I'm fine with it now. But in the early phase, I wanted to keep out of my danger zone and just stay in reality, stay conscious.
That's
I
beautiful.
believed would give me a chance for success. Oh, thank you. It was just wanting to make this work, not make it work, but giving it its best chance for the best outcome at the end of 3 months.
Philosophically, I tend to think we improve what we measure. And so I've always been a fan of the scale. And, it's easier to catch little gains than big gains. And it's
Hmm.
easier to correct for little gains than big gains, or easier to catch losing weight too quickly, when it's small rather than it's too big. But there are people who just struggle with the scale so much. I find this is
Yeah.
particularly true for people who have bulimia. They need to stay away from it and create a cocoon until they're feeling a lot more settled about their food, and maybe forever. Some people just have a pair of jeans that they try on to make sure they're not gaining weight, or string the tie around their waist, or, have a look in the mirror, or just see how their clothes fit. There are different ways to do it. I tend to be a left brain spreadsheet type of measure and improve it kind of person, but there
Yes.
are different ways to do it. There are
And
different
I
ways to do
understand, because I have some spreadsheet energy in me. Absolutely.
it.
And please know that I do agree with everything you just said. And for me, trying on a pair of jeans that were tight and had muffin top at the time. I used those and I took a picture of myself just to mark my path.
I'm kind of a geek trapped in a jock's body. I had all these
I relate.
measurements and
I love that.
calculations and 3 month moving average and 10-day moving average and velocity, all these types
Eh,
of things.
yeah, it's just whatever works. But I found that that really helped me when I used the pants. I felt like this journey is going to be 100% me. You allow a lot of, there's a word you use, I can't think of the word right now, but you allow us to create our own meals.
Food autonomy, yeah.
Food autonomy. And that was really important to me because I found that through my lifetime of dieting, there was a strong rebellion. Eventually, I would wear down and just feel rebellious about a program. And that never happened with this
Well,
because it
you,
was my program. I made it my own, and you allow that in the program.
well, you articulated the reason why when you described the outcome that you wanted and that you've achieved, which is that you don't feel like you're being dictated to.
No,
You don't feel like it's external authority rewarded by weight loss. You feel like it's a internal peace of mind rewarded by the freedom from food obsession, eventually the body that you want. But it's not this thing that you're going to have to stop because you don't feel like you're being bossed around like a little kid.
the truth is that if you use the skills and you don't break your lines, weight loss is a guarantee. That's another reason why I didn't want to use the scale. I wanted to trust that belief, and it is 100% absolutely true. 100%. There's one more piece about that I do feel for the ladies out there, especially ladies who are in perimenopause or menopause. There was another factor for me that I was working with,
Tell me.
and that was my hormones. My hormones right before my cycle, even though I'm supposedly in menopause, but I have all the symptoms as if I were in my usual cycle phase of my life. And so I would have intense cravings during my luteal phase of my cycle. And I had to really understand what was happening. And I know it was not until your program with my rules, with my 3 R's, that I truly understood that there were about 5 to 7 days of every month that I wasn't quite me. And that in addition to the pig, there was a hormonal force that the pig used as an excuse or a reason, but it's real. These hormonal shifts are real, but there is a time when the pig took advantage of that. And so I realized, wow, these times aren't me. There's another force happening. There's a second force. So learning how to understand my hormonal cycle, my hormones, the urges that also shift and get stronger during that time was a game changer
Did,
right
did,
there. That was huge.
did you make any adjustments to your rules during your luteal phase? Did you change what you were eating? How did you successfully navigate that?
Okay, a couple things. I worked with my hormone doctor on that and got all the blood work updated to really get a map of what's going on. I allowed myself to go into maintenance portions during that time. So I gave myself a week out of the month that I wasn't in deficit. I would have larger portions, but not portions that were weight gain portions. I gave myself the exception to have nighttime hot chocolate. It's actually an amazing hot chocolate that helps you go to sleep. That I found it's 10 calories a serving, and it's amazing. That was a really nice treat after dinner. And there are a lot of chocolate cravings during that time, so that gave me a little bit more of a relaxed way of dealing with it. I just really allowed myself, if I needed to go just under 4 hours because I was hungry a little more during that time, I could go like a little 15 minutes early or so. Usually I can go 5 hours between meals, not a problem. But during that time, I would get hungry maybe after lunch to dinner. And so I would give myself that. But everything else I kept the same, but was more of a challenge to close the kitchen without a snack during some of the months of those times. And a few times, those are times where I did break my line. But each time I did, I sharpened the process and was able to find a way to do it better. So it was actually a gift each time.
So it sounds like the solution was to just take the edge off of the strictness of the rules, to make them just a little
Yes.
bit easier, or to take that archery target, if you will, and move it a little bit closer. Not a lot closer, but a little bit closer while you were going through your cycle.
Absolutely. And I had those conditions, and just the relaxed conditions, it made me feel more comfort, and it worked. It helped so much. So that helped ease that time. But before the program, I looked at the times when my weight spiked up the most, and it would be monthly, and I saw the pattern, but I didn't even know it was happening until after I was in your program.
Did you integrate those changes officially into your rules and your written rules so that you wouldn't feel guilty about them?
I have them under the rules as conditions.
Okay. I think that's important. I think part of the evolution of the Defeat Your Craving system as you go through it is to identify the places where you really do need to loosen up a little bit. For sometimes it's for the sake of what you're going through physiologically.
Hmm.
Sometimes people will discover that some people are what I call cyclical bingers. Like people would say,
Yes.
every 10th day I have to binge, every 10th day. So I'll
Hmm.
say, well, what can we do in the ninth day to make it easier? So sometimes it's a cyclical binge, sometimes it's a vacation, sometimes it's time with friends. But a big part of the solution is recognizing that there's some situations which don't dominate your everyday life. So if you loosen up a little bit, it's not going to interfere with your overall health and fitness goals. But what you find you really do need to make some adjustments for, and to really codify that in your rules so you don't feel guilty about it at all. So the adjustments are just kind of built in. That's the kind of thing we can't really see on day one. That's the kind of thing that
Right.
requires some back and forth with your coach, and some work in the community groups. And so I'm glad that you figured out to do that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's big to really see the patterns. And that only happens through time. And I spent quite a few sessions with Yvonne discussing that, and just being able to give myself the other thing that really helped is that diet mentality is all about speed, getting it off fast. And I had to pull back from that. And with these conditions during that 1 week, a month, that really shifted my expectations of weight loss for timing with speed, and just relax into it and trust the process and know that I will get there when it's time to get there. As long as I know that I'm following my rules and I'm doing what I set out to do, I am progressing each month and I'm seeing the progress. And now I'm measuring the progress because I'm back on the scale because I can handle it.
I love
So
it.
it all works.
So, okay, I want to ask you a question
Yes.
about, because you started this by saying you were an emotional eater.
Yes.
And the traditional advice to emotional leaders is that you really need to solve those emotional problems so you'll be able to sit with the feelings. And what emotional eaters almost always want is to find freedom from food obsession and be able to just, sit in the present moment and eat calmly and peacefully, and eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full, and have a normal relationship with food. That's the quintessential dream of emotional leaders when they come to see me. Yet the approach that we take is different. We say, let's worry about the emotions later. Let's sever the link between the emotional stimulation and overeating. I don't think you have to fix all the emotions before you can achieve the goals that you're looking for. And you took that to heart and you did all the very practical things that were necessary to move your locus of control from external authority to internal desires, and, get out of the binge deprivation cycle and understand what it was like to be in a deficit instead, and to really find peace with food. But you didn't describe any real emotional work along the way. And having been someone who's let go of using food as a drug, who, now eats these 3 meals a day and is relatively peaceful in between meals, and, has effectively severed the link in the way that we say, do you find that the emotions that you were upset about are still there? How has it changed you personally? Do you find the emotions were not as bad as you thought they were going to be? What do you make out of the whole emotional eating thing now that you've done this?
I'm so glad you're bringing that up because that is a huge part of this. I always thought it was some deep emotional reason that was driving me to sabotage myself every month or, whenever I would sabotage myself. I realized that much of what was going on was physiological. That was first. Just my body was underfed. I mentioned earlier, I didn't know how to strike a balance. I always was either dieting or binging. And so that was the first thing that I didn't know. I was always chasing the underlying emotional reason. And I thought I couldn't lose weight until I discovered the eureka of what that was. I really learned that getting into action and being in the program and doing the steps, you discover what's under the surface. There's so many things. The reason of today wasn't the reason last month. And so I journal and meditate every day. I work with my rules every day. And when you're in the program and working the skills, you have more time to be able to have space to think about other things. When you're not binge eating, you will find your reason. You will find many things that are underneath the surface, but they're not 100% of the reason, at least for me, why my body wasn't at my goal weight. My body wasn't at my goal weight because I wasn't working the skills that would tell me when I was eating on or off. I was eating more than 3 meals a day. I was snacking in between. I wasn't closing the kitchen at night. I would get on the scale and be reactive and emotional about that. All the other things. And until I just set up the rules and followed them, if I'm ever having a time where I'm white knuckling the rules, especially during my cycle phase, the reasons were clear to me what was under the surface of the emotional urge to eat. And then I understand, okay, why am I uncomfortable and what do I want to avoid thinking about or feeling at this moment? That food is only going to compound and make it worse, right? Like you say, if you had 7 problems, now you have 8. So that helped more than anything.
If you have 7 problems and then you overeat, then you have 8 problems.
Yes, there you
Yeah.
go. Right.
The other thing that I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that previously, because you had not elucidated the real cause of the problem, you didn't understand your whole physiology and the multitude of things that were, I always say binging is not a unitary habit, it's a collection of habits. Actually, my former partner pointed that out first. It sounds like you used to think that the reasons must be psychogenic. There's something in my upbringing. Maybe I peeked at my brother in the bathtub and I feel guilty about it, or I could never really forgive myself for my father's death, or, some classically psychological reasoning that you might see in a movie. It sounds like you used to think of emotional eating being something like that, but going through the luteal phase of your cycle can be the cause of those emotions in the first place. And as you learn how to physiologically manage that better, then it doesn't really matter what happened when you were a kid, or, I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but it's not the primary cause. And you've learned that you can use these tools to prevent those feelings from manifesting as, negative eating behaviors anyway. This is a really great example of emerging from the confusing muck of mythology that's in our culture about psychology and overeating, and the mythology that's in the diet culture, and the mythology that's in the food obsession culture. It's just a clear target, a set of rules that define that target, a set of techniques for reinforcing your motivation and eliminating your excuses, and learning how to calm yourself down when you're about to break the rules. So, what should I have asked you today that you really wanted to talk about that you didn't? Do you want to share any specific refutations that were helpful to you? Sometimes the audience likes that. Do you want to talk any more about your motivation? Do you want to ask me any questions? What didn't we talk about that we should have talked about?
One thing I want to mention that you just talked about, I think is a big deal out in the world about the diet culture that we have to find the reason. And I learned that sometimes I'm just hormonal and hungry.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just tired and need rest. Other times I have performance anxiety of an upcoming project I'm working on or a project I'm in the middle of. So I learned this phrase called a comfort blanket. And sometimes I realized I was just looking for a comfort blanket with the false belief that the solution was in food. And it wasn't the underlying deep reason. It was just right there on the surface.
Yeah.
That's huge. And I'd say that there's this saying a quote, don't ever give up on something you can't spend a day without thinking about. You can't go a day without thinking about.
Wait, say that
And
again.
this was,
Say that again.
don't give up on something you can't go a day without thinking about.
Okay.
Mm,
So if you're thinking about it every day, you have to persist until you win.
exactly. And I wanted the freedom with a peaceful mind and ultimately, the body that was aligned with a peaceful mind, because a peaceful mind isn't thinking about food when you're not hungry. So you're not overweight. And that's what I wanted the most, that turning life from black and white into color, that peaceful mind and body. And that's what I thought about every day. And that kept escaping me through diets, the on and off, gain weight, lose weight. I'd say to anyone who wants that and can't stop thinking about that, feels like they're not fully free because they're not comfortable in their body. It is the best thing that ever happened to me. I would do it over and over and over if I had the choice. And I did it the week before Thanksgiving.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
I'm curious, Sybil, how this has impacted the rest of your life. For example, I
Oh,
know that you're a personal branding coach. You can feel free to give your website if you want to when we're done. But I'm wondering how it impacted your work with the small businesses that you work with and your thinking about personal branding. And because that's a very actually intimate job to do because you have to get to know people really well and you have
yeah.
to work with their positive thinking and self-destructive thinking. And long, long time ago, I did some of that kind of work and it was very enjoyable, but very thorough in much the same way that this is thorough. And I'm just wondering, have you noticed anything different?
I'd love to answer that question. Okay, so what I do love about this program is that it has extended into other areas of my life, my personal life, as well as my work life. In my personal life, I use the same format of my rules, reasons, and reputations with my financial health and well being. I use the same with visibility for my business. And there are, voices, forces that are in anything moving us forward. So I'd say that while the program presents itself as the solution for removing cravings, defeat your cravings, it actually will defeat any other area that is preventing you from reaching a dream goal. It applies to so many other areas of life. So it's well beyond the body and food cravings. It has also helped me in my work. I work as a stylist, personal brand, clothing, and so many women are facing challenges in their body, accepting their body, feeling comfortable in their skin, and all of the things related to that. So for me to be able to finally find peace with this and really have the personal experience of knowing how my clients are feeling in those moments and being able to be on the other side of that has influenced the way I do my work, the way I work with clients. And it has been a beautiful transformative experience for me. And I'm able to bring deeper transformation to the work.
How has this impacted the way that you dress and portray yourself? How has it impacted your own personal brand?
Oh my gosh, I feel so good in my body and about my body. And there's a distinction there. But the lightness I feel and the light that I have in me, I'm able to actually feel it on a regular basis. The joy of being in my body and feeling so good about my body, no matter what. I worked to feel good about my body shape prior, even when I was larger. But I'm so proud of myself that with your program, that I was able to trust it and stay the course and the lightness, the joy, the ability to think about so many other things. Like I said, life went from black and white to color. And I thought I was living well before, but wow, the level of joy that you get when you're on the other side of this program. And I'm only in the 5th month since I started right before Thanksgiving. And it's priceless. The level of peace that you have when you put your head on the pillow and the joy when you wake up in the morning and living in a constant state of gratitude that this one issue that just was
The bane of your existence, right?
all of us are accomplished in so many areas of our life. This one thing was just escaping us. And to be able to be on the other side of it and to know that I did it, the level of confidence that you get from that alone is worth the price of admission right there.
Beautiful.
Priceless.
Most of my clients tend not to be business people, but they do tend to be women who've spent a lifetime feeling uncomfortable in their bodies. And, when they're successful, they finally feel good about themselves. They do want to learn how to dress and make a personal statement. So just on the off chance that it might be appropriate for anybody to connect with you further about that, do you want to give your website, or is that inappropriate for now?
No, that's perfectly fine. They can find me. I'm the Sybil Henry, the style concierge, and I'm happy to speak with anyone about either where they are right now and feeling comfortable in their body where they are and when they get to the other side.
What's the name of that website again?
TheStyleConcierge.com.
The Style Concierge, and concierge is CONCIERGE.
.com. Yes, that's it. I always
Okay.
have to spell it.
My mother was an English teacher, so I rebelled against spelling, and
She would have been proud.
yeah, she would have been proud just now. That's true. Is there anything else about eating, the program, anything we talked about today that you want to say before we go?
I simply want to thank you for allowing me to share my experience, and for anyone who has any reason of if this is speaking to you, but there's some kind of resistance. I think when it first happened for me, I'm like, oh, because I read the book first. There's the pig. The pig is trying to keep me from doing this work because it is the best thing that ever happened to me. Best money ever spent. What a bargain for what you get.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit DefeatYourCravingsCoaching.com. That's DefeatYourCravingsCoaching.com. Thanks.